Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for another Inside the Beltway with Star Parker. And thank you for joining me. This is another Pro-Life Friday. I'm Day Gardner, and I have a wonderful guest joining me today. But before we go into that, let me just reiterate what we were talking about a little bit early. Well, actually last Friday. I said I would come back and we talk a little bit about the racial aspect of the Kermit Gosnell case in Philadelphia. And, you know, there have been so many surprising turns since last Friday, and we're going to talk about a lot of those things and probably all of those things a little bit here right now. But, you know, last week, the trial was in full swing. We were looking forward to getting to the defense side of the Kermit Gosnell story. And, well, the defense has rested. It surprised all of us, you know, there in Philadelphia, that the defense did not call any witnesses at all and instead just rested the case. So the trial essentially, with regard to witnesses and all of that, is over. What they're going to do now is, as of this coming Monday, there will be closing arguments. We'll hear both sides close. And this comes as a surprise. I don't know, good, bad, I don't know. We're going to talk a little bit about that with my next guest. And then we'll talk about the racial aspect of it, and we'll still also talk about the fact that there seems to be very little coverage in the media. We have had more coverage than we did initially in the beginning. However, you know, still, this is not one of those stories that you see on the news every night in depth. No one's covering it. So let me, without further ado, introduce you to my wonderful guest, who has been a very good friend over many years. And it's really interesting how I met Reverend Robert Solomon. We have spoken, I guess we were in the same room at a forum many years ago, and we've been in contact through telephone and email for years, maybe like 4 or 5 years or so. And the most wonderful thing is that we've stayed in touch, and I met him for the first time face-to-face today. So it's really wonderful to meet you. Again, this is Reverend Robert Solomon of the Gillfield Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., and I want to thank you for joining me today.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on the air.
Yeah,
and,
nice
being
meeting
in studio
you.
With you. Yeah, it's great to meet you face-to-face for the very first time, actually.
Amen to that. You know, last week we were talking about the Kermit Gosnell trial in Washington, in Philadelphia. Now, to give you a little bit of background, Kermit Gosnell is a doctor, a so-called doctor in West Philadelphia, for the most part, a black community neighborhood. He is charged, or was charged, with killing 7 babies. These are babies who were born alive, and you know they were delivered. He killed them after they were born. He is also charged in the death of one mother, Carnemeyer Monger. So the thing is, he's charged with 8 counts. That's how the trial proceeded. That's how the trial went on. We heard all of the prosecution stories. We'll be talking about some of that stuff, which was really very grotesque and very difficult to watch. And then, you know, we just recently, and I went to court hearing. I wanted to actually hear what the defense was going to be. I wanted to see, who's this guy going to call?
Right.
The defense lawyer, as you know, is Jack McMahon there in Philadelphia. And I thought, who's he going to call? I want to see. I was hoping against hope, that he would put Gosnell on stand, because I thought, I'd like to see what this man has to say about all the stuff he is, charged with doing. And of course, none of that happened, Robert. None of it. I mean, he went right into, the defense rests its case. So
wow, yeah.
That's where we are now.
Yeah, that's really amazing, considering the fact that the attorney wouldn't put his own client on the stand to testify. And then furthermore,
what's that tell you?
Yeah. Definitely it sounds like there's some very incriminating evidence that if they were to have him be put on the stand and be questioned directly by the attorney, he would reveal some things that were definitely very detrimental to him in their case, as well as not calling forth any other witnesses as well.
Right, right. Now, what do you know? We have not seen very much of this. I just heard this morning that 68% of Americans, and this is according to Fox News, 68% of Americans are unfamiliar with the Gosnell story. Mm-hmm. So what does that say about our media and the coverage of this story?
Yeah, I think it says about our media in general, whether it's print or electronic, that they basically are AWOL on not only this case in particular, but about the abortion issue in general. Let me give you an example of that locally, in a case that took place in this area in Montgomery County in Germantown, Maryland, with Leroy Carhart, the famed abortionist who was kind of like an itinerant abortionist, has a clinic here in Maryland, in Montgomery County. And Jennifer Morbelli, a 29-year-old teacher from White Plains, New York, came down. She was 33 weeks pregnant. She's married. And not only does she go there to have her baby killed, but she ends up being killed as well. And I don't think there was any media coverage on that in this area.
No, there wasn't. And that's an interesting story because now she went to have her baby killed, of course, and the reason was because her baby was not 100% perfect.
Right. There was a diagnosis of some type of a disease, but they found out it was an incorrect diagnosis.
Yeah.
And so
her healthy baby was killed because of an incorrect diagnosis, and therefore the mother also lost her life. And we should say that Jennifer left behind a child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so
she was a mom.
Yeah, and so it's not surprising that in the Gosnell case that there's very limited coverage in it on considering this case in the media. In this area, I believe the Washington Post wrote one story concerning it.
Yeah.
And I found
Count them, one.
Yeah, and I found that out through a media watchdog organization that I received emails from. And that probably had to be done kicking and screaming. And what I mean by that is someone had to call the editors and other people within the Washington Post newspaper story to let them know the trial was actually taking place. And at first, one, they said they didn't either know about the story. And then when they did find out about it, well, they looked at it as being a local story. You know, of course, we're not in Philadelphia. We're here in the D.C. area.
Right.
So they finally did one story on it. But I'm not sure if any of the other local television stations, channels 4, 5, 7, and 9, did any reporting on it at all.
You know, anything that from what I've heard and from what I've seen, you have to keep in mind, when I first went to court, the court was like empty. I mean, you could hear crickets. It was so empty. And I was there with another very good pro-life friend of mine, Cheryl Sullinger, who is with Operation Rescue. They're phenomenal people.
Right.
And, of course, we're sitting there in court, and we're thinking, this is the Kermit Gosnell trial case. We're talking about 8 murders he's charged with. The courtroom was empty. There were, I think, about 3 or 4 local newspaper-type media people there. And I couldn't believe it. Now, this courtroom holds about 100 people or so. You know, maybe more than that. And so it was empty.
Yeah.
And what we did immediately, we thought, well, you know, we got to do something.
Yeah.
We got to do something. So we actually, with Cheryl, we put together a press conference. And who came to that press conference, the press conference was on April 4th, was Pastor Clenard Childress, who is, he's just a pro-life warrior, a phenomenal pastor, a man of God, a man of truth, you know, everything like gangbusters in Montclair, New Jersey. Well, he came over for a press conference. So did Reverend Mahoney. Patrick Mahoney was there. So 2 women who are friends of mine, 2 women who are post-abortive. Both of them suffered abortions in Philadelphia. They came over for this press conference. They spoke. We had some other members from New Jersey, Right to Life. So it was very interesting. There were pastors from a Philadelphia church were there. So we had this press conference on April 4th. Now, here's the thing. It was covered by whatever media was there, the Inquirer, the Daily News,
Two
I think the
Philadelphia
Tribune,
papers.
the Philadelphia Magazine were there, and they covered the story, right? By April 11th, Kirsten Powers, who does commentary for Fox, she actually came out and said, you know what, no matter where you stand on either side of the coin, this is a front page story that should have been reported. And she shamed the media.
Yeah.
By which everybody was so ashamed. She said nobody else was there. She shamed the media after our press conference. And the next thing I know, the media seats are full. There were about 30 media people there.
Wow.
So that was
that much of an increase.
That was saying something. I believe that, you know, God prompted us to do the press conference, which prompted her to write her press piece. The media was there, but here's the thing. They came, they saw, and they kind of wrote their little blurbs or whatever.
Right.
But where are the main stories?
Right. And in
What's
other
the
words,
main coverage?
where's the media covering this as a result of there being more media people that were actually at the trial in terms of there being front page stories in different major newspapers across the country? Where is this being, broadcast as a major story on your local television networks, not only in Philadelphia, but here in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and various other large and midtown cities here in the United States. And it's just not happening.
It's not happening, and that's why Fox News this morning says 68% of Americans are very unfamiliar with this story.
Right, and Fox News is really the only major television cable network that's really dealing in depth with the story. I believe the ACLJ Live, Jay Sekulow Live, has been talking about it on some things concerning it. But other than that, it's not getting a lot of airtime, and that's unfortunate.
Well, you know what really surprised me, and I'll say this, is that the first time I saw any fairness given to this story was CNN, Anderson Cooper, 360. And I thought, my goodness, here's CNN, who are not necessarily fair or balanced.
Right. And they're not exactly pro-life either.
Exactly. And he did give the story, I thought, very fair coverage. I mean, he had David Altrogi, who is the person who wrote 3801 Lancaster. If anyone is not familiar with that documentary, 3801 Lancaster, check it out. You can see the promos, and you may be able to see the video, the documentary online. So check that out, 3801 Lancaster. But he did have him on, and he talked about the Gosnell trial. And I thought, so this is Anderson Cooper on CNN.
Right.
Job.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And I do appreciate the fact that the Post did write a story concerning it, and that CNN did talk about some things concerning the Gosnell trial. And I'm also very appreciative that Kirsten Powers said that this is basically the media just deliberately ignoring this story outright, and that it wasn't right. And with her saying that, combined with the press conference that you all had, really was a catalyst for the media to be there at this trial in much greater force. And we're going to have to continue to do what we can to keep this particular trial front and center, because we don't have it very often. They're very, very rare in the pro-life movement. There's almost a cabal concerning the pro-life issue. When you look at the media, when you look at academia and politicians, they all work together that are, on the opposite side of this issue in consort with one another to suppress media stories concerning anything that happens in abortion clinics. They almost seem like they're working as partners to make sure that Planned Parenthood always doesn't get looked at as a provider of an organization that kills babies, but they talk more about, their referrals for adoptions, their breast cancer screenings, which they do very, very little
or
of.
to none of. Most of them don't do any of that at all.
Yeah, and they don't make any adoption referrals.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the ones they do are a very, very small percentage of their overall business. Their big money-making cash cow is killing babies, particularly African-American babies.
Amen. As you can see where we're going, and we're talking about all of it. We're just putting it all out there on the line. Everything from, we'll talk a little bit more also about Planned Parenthood, which is a $1 billion a year business. And we have to also admit, everybody out there, each and every one of you, are contributing to baby killing, because your tax dollars are going to that organization that kills babies, and you have to know that. And if you don't like that, then you should really do something about it. I don't like it. I have a real big problem with that, and I think we need to talk further about defunding Planned Parenthood. We're not going to go there in this show because that's going to take a whole other show. But we're going to take a short break right now. But we're going to come back and we're going to talk to you about why the media has been not reporting or has not been reporting on this horrible, horrible case with Kermit Gosnell. Stay tuned. We will be right back. You're listening to Inside the Beltway with Star Parker. Hello and welcome back. You are tuned into Inside the Beltway with Star Parker on Urban Family Talk. I'm Day Gardner, here for another Pro-Life Friday. Today in America, we would all like to believe that racism no longer exists, but it's not the case. That fact is most evident to me every night when I turn on the evening news and I hear the stories about white girls like Lacey Peterson Elizabeth Smart, Natalie Holloway, little Kaylee Anthony, and numerous other blonde-haired, blue-eyed children who are abused, missing, or have been brutally murdered. You know, my heart breaks and aches for each one of them and their families. Yet I know that there are little black girls and boys who have disappeared or died the same horrible, tragic deaths, and the silence of the media regarding those children, black children, is deafening. Now, in January of 2011, Kermit Gosnell, an abortionist in West Philadelphia, who was black, by the way, was charged with 8 counts of murder for killing a 41-year-old mother and 7 newborn babies. Unfortunately, unless you live in Philadelphia, where Gosnell's clinic was, very little was heard about these heinous crimes. And we have to look at why. I mean, you know, where is the media with regard to this horrible, atrocious crime? I mean, these are 8 people, 8 lives. You know, today we have with us Reverend Robert Solomon, who is a very good friend of mine from Guilford Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. And, you know, Robert, we have to look at the reality of this.
Yeah, that's true.
If there were other children, or possibly if it were situations were different, would the media have chimed in sooner and bigger?
Yeah, I believe they would have, and particularly if they were celebrities, you know, on top of, being non-black. And, you know, the thing is that you bring out a good point that although racism is not the number one obstacle that is hindering the progress of black Americans, it definitely still does exist. And when you look at the issue of abortion, it allows people that are in the abortion industry, that are abortion doctors, that actually are racist and hate black Americans, and maybe even in the media who don't like black Americans, it gives them a cover to really cloak their racism. They don't have to go out and do the same types of things that racists did in the past. You think about the Ku Klux Klan, an organization that practiced the lynching of black Americans. And, lynching takes too long. It's something that you only have to kill a person one by one. But when you think about having abortion clinics and so forth, you have much more of a systemized way of killing a lot greater number of people. And so another thing that concerns me is when you deal with black Americans on this issue. Unfortunately, many black Americans are not as passionate and concerned about this issue as they need to be, considering the fact that although black women make up about 12% of the population, about 34 to 37% of the abortions are done upon black babies coming out of the womb of an African-American mother.
Exactly. And yet we also sit back while these abortion facilities are placed in urban and minority neighborhoods. The rest of them are usually around college campuses.
Right.
And
so that targets young people.
Yeah, and it's not a big secret. I mean, the Ellen Guttmacher Institute, which is the research arm for Planned Parenthood, will list where these abortion facilities are placed. So you can really go to the monster itself and get this information. Also, the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, has a lot of this information. So we're not just throwing out blind facts, folks. We are telling you where we get our facts are from. We go to the monster and get the truth. And
they're saying it actually. It's not people that are involved in the pro-life movement and want to abolish the killing of babies.
Exactly. And, you know, it's very difficult. It's very difficult for me and for Robert here also to accuse someone of racism. You know, I take that very, very seriously, and it is one of the most overused and least documented insults, I think, in today's politically charged climate. Yet there are times when it's rightly used, and we have to say that time is now. Because I honestly believe that if the situation was different with regard to the race of these children, the media would be more involved. I can't tell you how many times I turn on television and I see story after story after story about Jodi Arias. You know, I couldn't believe. I mean, this is going on while the Gosnell trial was going on. You can turn on one of my favorite. Now I have to say this: Nancy Grace. I watch Nancy Grace. It's not like every single night or anything like that, but I tune into her show maybe once, twice a week, which is to hear what she has to say, especially about when it comes to these children that are missing, children that are abused. Kaylee Anthony's story was so heartbreaking to all of America, but that's just it. All of America heard it.
Right, correct. Yeah, that's
all of
the big
America
difference.
heard the story. You know, we heard it from the very beginning when the little girl was missing. We saw all throughout the whole court situation, even after her mother got off after, burying this little girl in a shallow grave and got off. I mean, my heart broke and still continues to break to thinking, what was that little girl thinking in the last moments of death, the throes of death? And at the same time, I'm about the Gosnell babies. These are babies that were delivered. Now, we have to keep in mind that, you think of any newborn baby coming into this world, and you expect immediately to think in terms of a loving parent and loving arms, and to know that this man, delivered these babies, and one of the workers actually said she, kind of played with the baby a little bit.
Yeah, I heard that too.
And then the baby was killed.
Right, and so one of the ways that the babies that were born alive, that they actually were killed, from what I understand, is that he would take some type of scissors and snip their spinal columns in the back of their necks. And I mean, that's very gruesome and a horrible way to die. Yeah. But that's just how, graphic and grotesque the death of these babies were. And yet, when you compare Hermit Gosnell's trial in this case and the things that he did that were, absolutely hideous, atrocious, and abominable compared to the cases you brought with Ailey Anthony and all these other cases of missing white children. I mean, the silence and the coverage is almost deafening. And so you can see that when you deal with the abortion issue, and we want to let people know, we absolutely know that it's not just black babies that are only the ones that are being killed in the womb. They're also killing white babies and Hispanic babies and young babies of all different races. But what was the original intent of the abortion industry and birth control and sterilization was a specific demographic racial group, and that was black Americans. Yeah. You can look throughout the history of the speeches of Margaret Sanger. She's also gave speeches at Ku Klux Klan rallies.
And Margaret Sanger was the founder of Planned Parenthood.
Right. She was the founder. It was formerly called, before that, the American Birth Control League. And so they changed the name from the American Birth Control League to Planned Parenthood because of the American Birth Control League's support of the racial policy and sterilization and eugenics of the Nazi regime under Adolf Hitler. And so after the war ended and it was becoming well known about the atrocities of the Nazi regime and the fascists in Europe, and how that eugenics and those words were made, well, like a cuss word, he said, wait a minute, we got to stop using the word eugenics ourselves, because that's being tied to the racial agenda of hating people that we look at as being inferior. And we have to go to less threatening words, like planning.
Oh,
and then it became Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, they're so smart, and we have to know that they're very, very smart and very cunning in the way that they handled this whole thing and are handling it. Because today, Planned Parenthood is continuing its business. It's of baby killing and sterilization. They hurt women, but we're talking about the racial aspect and how the media has not covered this. And as I said, it's a very difficult thing, because in today's America, I'm a very patriotic person. I love this country.
Yeah,
I've traveled enough to know that this America is the place to be. I'm a true American, but we have not come as far as I think a lot of us have hoped or have thought. I think that we like to think that we've come so far with regard to race, but that's not. We're just not there yet. One thing we should talk about is, where are the black so-called leaders? Now, you have to keep in mind the people that maybe white America thinks are our leaders are not my leaders. Reverend Jesse Jackson, who cares? Al Sharpton, who cares?
No.
They're not my leaders.
They've been self-appointed and more media-appointed, I think.
They're media-appointed leaders. I think by the white media, for the most part, of the black people. I mean, they're so far away, so out of touch with blacks and with America, I think, in general. They just are so passé.
Yeah, I would agree.
So let's kick them to the curb. They're not my leaders at all.
Right, and the thing is that when you look at black America as a whole, we want to see more black Americans passionately involved in this issue for the simple fact that killing any baby, regardless of race or color or gender, is wrong. It's not an issue of whether, killing a white baby is, better than killing a black baby or vice versa.
Right.
But that when you see racism being lived out in this type of way, it's a tragedy and a disgrace that we don't see more blacks speaking out against it on a much more regular and a consistent basis. And unfortunately, people that have either appointed themselves or been appointed by the media, and the white media more specifically, to be black leaders, they said, listen, don't touch this issue. Yeah. This is just kind of look the other way and stick your head in the sand.
But here's the thing, is that the media has given those people a voice. Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and those people have a voice because of the media.
That's true.
You know, now there are black conservatives who I consider my leaders. Dr. Alveda King, Star Parker, Dr. Ben Carson. I mean, there's so many people. I love Herman Cain.
Yeah.
You know, so there's so many people I think who are phenomenal leaders.
Yeah,
you
they
know,
are.
And they are people that I think are the really should be leading this country, especially with regard to blacks, because they get it. They understand. But you know what? The media doesn't give them the time of day for, you know, so and that's the problem.
They're either ignored completely, or whenever they're not ignored and they're allowed to come on different mainstream media programs, they're immediately vilified. There's name calling, there's ostracization, the question of their blackness being authentic comes up. They're sellouts to the Republican Party, or they're just out there and they're not taken seriously.
Yeah.
And that's a tragedy, because they have, many good things to offer and many good things to say.
Exactly. Especially now you think about this case. Here's Kermit Gosnell, charged with killing 7 babies. He's in a black neighborhood, preying on black women, minority women.
Correct. Right. He's
a black man. He is the poster boy for black on black crime.
Yeah.
And so you have all this going on, and where is the Congressional Black Caucus?
AWOL, we don't want to get involved.
Heard there were 18 members of Congress who actually did a 1 minute. I think this was yesterday. It was, and it should be showing, I think, on Sunday. I'm not sure. We can double check on that. I think it's Sunday at 5:00. But anyway, who did 1 minute speeches with regard to the Gosnell case. 18 members of Congress. And I don't know. I have to check, but I think there were very few Democrats in there, and I don't think there were any black Democrats. So where's the Congressional Black Caucus? Why aren't they coming out and saying, you know what this man did was a horror. It was wrong. It's a heinous crime. And even if whether we're Democrats, whether we stand against this horror. We haven't seen, our own president has decided not to comment.
That's correct. And when you look at the Congressional Black Caucus specifically, they're actually walking in lockstep with the party platform of the Democratic Party, which has been very pro Roe v. Wade since the decision in 1973. And it's tragic. And so when you look at it from that perspective, they're not going to get involved in this case. They just aren't. And, if they do, there's going to be a great price to pay politically for them. And but people have to stand up, irrespective of political party affiliation, whether you're Republican or Democrat or an independent or you third-party affiliation. This is a crime against humanity. It's a sin against God.
And that's what Kirsten Powers was saying. And that's what I appreciate. That's what Anderson Cooper said. It's not about where you stand. This crime is just so heinous and so wrong. And, I wasn't going to go here, Robert, but during the break, you mentioned the fact that there was a gala that someone that we know was supposed to attend, and something happened there. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. What had happened was that President Barack Obama was going to be a part of a gala black tie event. It was actually a fundraising event for Planned Parenthood sometime this week. I think it was supposed to be on a Wednesday or a Thursday, but because there has been a lot of opposition to taxpayer funding of abortion, people that have heard about the Kermit Gosnell trial, and also something that took place in Florida. There was a person that was a lobbyist for Planned Parenthood that was testifying before a committee, I think either in the Florida State Senate or the Florida House of Representatives, about a baby that was born alive there in a botched abortion. And the Democratic politician asked, well, what do you do about the baby that's born alive? Isn't that supposed to be the patient once it survived? And she says, well, something to the effect that we have to think about that. So there's a convergence on Capitol Hill of all of these things going on at the same time. So what the president did, instead of speaking at the gala event, at this black tie event that's a fundraiser for Planned Parenthood, he's just going to speak at another event the next day. which would be kind of typical for any politician that is for baby killing. And unfortunately, our president is for that. He believes in that.
Is that event today?
I think it may be today.
Yeah. Pro-Life Friday, and that's what our president is doing. And that's a really sad thing also, because, this is something, especially because it was involved, this black doctor, because it involved the killing of so many children, because of the fact that it also included the killing of this woman and the negligence in her death. You would think that he really would have come out and said, it's at least it's a heinous crime. It's absolutely horrible. And, I hope that, this guy gets the full extent of the law or something.
That justice is done.
Something,
and yet he's been eerily silent on it.
No comment. Hey, you know what? That tells an awful lot. So I guess there's not much more we can say about that. So, you know what? We're going to take a break in just a little while. But before we do, I'd like to go into just a little bit what we really need to talk about. I'd like to talk about Karnamaya Monger, who is the mother. She's a 41-year-old mother who lost her life in abortion. And we'll talk about her story a little bit in just a few minutes. Very, very sad story for her and her family. Again, I want to thank you for joining us. You are tuned into Inside the Beltway with Star Parker on Urban Family Talk. I'm Day Gardner. Pro-Life Fridays. Hello and welcome back. Once again, you're tuned into Inside the Beltway with Star Parker here on Urban Family Talk. I'm Day Gardner, and this is another Pro-Life Friday. We have been talking about Kermit Gosnell and the horrors, the house of horrors he had there in West Philadelphia. And I want to spend just a little time especially talking about Karnamaya Monger. She was one of Gosnell's patients. Actually, on November 19th, let me take you back a little bit to give you some background about this woman, because if you haven't heard about the babies, I'm sure you haven't heard about her either. So let's talk about her and tell you who she was. On November 19th, 2009, 41-year-old mother, Karnamaya Monger, suffered a fatal drug overdose during an abortion procedure at the Women's Health Society right there in West Philadelphia, where Kermit Gosnell presided. Now, along with her husband, Ash, this mother of 3 and grandmother of 1, she arrived in the United States only 4 months before, after spending 20 years in a refugee camp in Nepal. So she was in a refugee camp for 20 years. She arrived here and was here for 4 months. Now, she came to the United States with her family on July 19th in 2009 as part of a humanitarian resettlement program. Her husband had just found a job in a chicken factory in Virginia where they lived. This woman spoke no English at all. Okay? She was more than 18 months pregnant. Now, I heard her daughter talk on the stand. I was there in Philadelphia in the courtroom when her daughter she was sobbing off and on throughout the whole testimony. You can tell she really missed her mother. She also needed someone to translate because she is also broken English.
Right, sure.
And she was talking about how her mother was, more than 18 weeks pregnant, and realized that under their circumstances with their family, they're all living in, kind of cramped situations. The resettlement program would only be for 3 months, where they would help the family out. After that, that was it. So the mother, in desperation, thought, well, we can't afford to have this baby. I need to work. The mother thought she had to work. The daughters work. Everybody needed to have jobs to support this family. Now, the sad thing is that that anybody should feel that, okay, so I have to terminate this pregnancy. I mean, that in itself is a horror and a sad thing, but that's what she decided to do. They went to, after being pushed around from abortion clinic to abortion clinic, different people didn't want to do it because it was, a kind of a later term pregnancy. So there were abortionists who said, we don't do them that late. That's just too late for us. She ended up somehow in Philadelphia, Gosnell's clinic. She was given medication the day before for her cervix to dilate. They told her to come back the next day. She came back the next day. And while she was there in the facility, from what I heard on the stand, she was given drugs. And there was one point when her daughter checked on her. She said she checked on her because she wanted to see if her mother was breathing. Right. And her mother was very, kind of really out of it. And anyway, to make matters worse, this woman went into cardiac arrest. Now, I also heard testimony of the paramedic who had come in to work on her. He said she had flatlined, and he started working on her to get a heart rate. And they said, well, what was the doctor doing? They said, oh, he was standing over there, with his arms folded, near the wall or whatever. And I thought, wait, here's a doctor who has umpteen years of training, practice. Why wasn't he working on her? And then you have this paramedic who has the equivalent of an associate's degree, like 2 years or whatever, and he manages to get a faint pulse on Connor Maya Mongar. The long and short of it is that she goes to the hospital, and she dies there.
Yeah, that was definitely the Kermit Gosnell abortion clinic itself, from what I understand, was a house of horrors. And some of the things I'm going to say are very explicit and very graphic, so I just want to warn you. Baby parts in jars. Yeah. Blood at different parts of the clinic, probably unsterilized, equipment.
Definitely.
What you're talking about.
Unsterile,
you're talking about, her being drugged like that. That wasn't anesthesia, to kill the pain for even killing the baby. I mean, the abortion industry, it almost seems like it's run by the mafia and other people that are involved in syndicated organized crime with the things they're allowed to do. So it's bad enough that they're killing preborn children in the womb that are alive, and yet they're involved in clinic violations. They're involved in accepting donations to kill the black babies. They're involved in accepting donations to kill a baby if it's a female. They have workers that encourage people to how they can skirt around Medicaid billing. You've got just filthy conditions there, and you have doctors that are very, very calloused. And so when this doctor saw this woman going in cardiac arrest, and he just kind of has his arms folded, if you're killing babies in the womb, you're not likely to want to help someone that's having a drug overdose that maybe you helped induce.
Yeah. And I think that's what the problem is, and he's of course up for that. One thing we should really say is that this is happening across America. Yeah. You think that we're sitting here and we're talking about the Kermit Gosnell case. It's just one case that's happening in Philadelphia.
But he's a quack, and he's just off the fringe extremist.
All across the country, babies are being killed in this very same way. You have to understand that killing a child up until the 9th month is not outlawed. What is not legal is that they believe the child should be killed first before being born. And that's what the problem is, like here in Maryland and other states. But also women across the country are dying terrible deaths. Many women, of course, can no longer have children. They can't, they've lost their childbearing. One of the women in Philadelphia, I said, who did our press conference with us, Arlene Campbell, is she always thought she'd have children. She had an abortion at 18, and she was never able to have children. Her uterus was torn, and she had a whole bunch of other problems, and she was never able to have children. And she said to that day, it's just a horrific thing whenever she sees families. That's a very difficult thing. Yeah. But we should say that there have been other women who died. Tanya Reeves.
Up in Chicago. Went to a Planned Parenthood clinic. She
went to a Planned Parenthood clinic in Chicago in our president's backyard. We have to say that.
That's true.
And the thing is, of course, he didn't. I don't think he commented on that case either.
No, he didn't.
But here is a young woman, and I think she was 21 years old, but she was killed. She also left behind a baby and a fiance. She was ready to have a great life. And of course, she bled out. She bled to death in a Planned Parenthood clinic. This woman bled to death in a Planned Parenthood clinic. Young girl. Such a sad story. Also, I mean, this happens across America. You were talking about, of course, here in Maryland.
Yeah, Jennifer Morbelli.
Yeah, who died. There was a woman in Florida, and we're picking these out. We're not talking about 5, 6 women. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women. Priests for Life actually lists, I think, like
the number of
400 or 500 women they have on their, and of course there's more than that, but they list some of the women so you at least get to know their names and their stories.
Forgive me for interrupting you. If you're hearing about all these murders of women at abortion clinics, all right, the babies are dead, but the women going there to get their babies killed, they're dying too. Yes. Isn't that something called like serial murder or something like that? I mean, that would be something that law enforcement agencies all throughout the country would be getting briefed on in police stations, that homicide detectives.
Abortion clinics are not regulated. in any way.
Right.
You know, you have to think about that. They're not regulated. They have no restrictions. You know, the people who work there are not. They don't have to be licensed doctors or any that have any degrees at all.
That's correct.
We saw in the Gosnell case where two of the people who called themselves Dr. Eileen and Dr. Steve, they went to school and had some medical background, but they were not licensed doctors at all. Yet they were seeing patients, giving out drugs to patients, prescriptions to patients. Some of them actually murdering the children. Actually, did these abortions, these horrible abortions, the snipping of their spinal columns. They actually did this. These are not doctors. These are bloody camps that are really in business to make a lot of money by killing your children, by killing our children.
Right. That's very true. And when you think about that, 400 or 450 women have been killed. You would be asking yourself, why haven't we heard more?
That's all they have listed on their website.
Right, so there could be more, actually.
There's more than that.
Yeah, and so this is something that is a deep, dark secret. You know, we talk about in families, they have secret sins. In other words, the
skeletons.
Things skeletons in people's closet, things that they've done that other family members don't know about. And the general public, for by and large, has absolutely no idea that these things are taking place. I mean, the abortion industry is also, involved in fraud as far as billing is concerned. They have, I think, Medicaid billing fraud cases that the ACLJ is actually adjudicating right now. So they're also involved in misuse of money as well as killing people. So you have to ask yourself, if they're involved in illegal activities, even that are accompanying killing unborn babies, but they're doing all these other things in addition to that are surrounding that, you have to ask yourself, what type of industry is this? What type of human beings work there? You know,
let's think about the Gosnell case. Of course, we know the defense is rested. Next week, we hear closing arguments. Let's see, either way, if he gets off, what do you think the best case, what's going to happen if he should happen to get off?
If he should happen to get off, I would like to see another press conference done by the pro-life movement, and for people to say, look, this is the type of thing that people are up against when you go against the abortion industry and the abortion cabal. This is what you're up against when you deal with people in the media, when you deal with people in academia, when you deal with people in politics. They want everything that is wrong and evil about the killing of preborn babies, the death of babies born alive that they don't give treatment for, the drugging of patients, the raping of women, the racial discrimination of blacks that takes place in
Planned
Parenthood.
In terms of sex abuse, especially
and sex abuse, sex predators.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
By letting this man go, you're allowing all of these practices to continue.
And saying it's okay.
And saying that it's okay. And so we in the pro-life movement, we have to be the pioneers, and we have to lead the charge to bring this to the public's attention. And we have to give every media outlet that will listen and that will print a story, we have to give them a story. Every television station that wants to run a story on it, they have to get a story on it. But we also have to wake the church up as well. By and large, there are pockets of the church that are involved in it, but not in a comprehensive, coordinated way, and that's both Protestant and Catholic. And black ministers in particular need to be much more involved in this. But the reason why is that Planned Parenthood has been working many years in the black community under something called the Negro Project. It was also started by Margaret Sanger in 1939 with the express purpose of saying we want to bring birth control and sterilization to the black community, and we don't want the word to get out that we want to exterminate the black population. And the minister is the man that can straighten anybody out in the black church among their more rebellious members. So we have to enlist and hire ministers with colorful personalities and social service backgrounds to change that idea.
And that's what they did. They actually paid ministers to tell to promote this horrible lie to their congregations. And they're doing the very same thing today. They are paying people, which is one reason why Jesse Jackson is no longer pro-life. He was a pro-life, staunch pro-lifer until he ran for office and he needed money and all that went wayside. He sold his soul to the devil. Let's just also if Gosnell gets, if he gets convicted, that is something else. I mean, I hear people saying, well, what is that going to mean? Does it mean that abortion is going to end? No, it's not. Doesn't mean that. But I'm hoping and I'm praying with all of the atrocities that we see, everything, especially in this case, that there will be an awakening to America within the country, this this great country that I love, about how children who are born alive are left to die on a shelf, thrown into, trash bins while they're still alive.
Or a soiled room at a hospital up in Chicago.
A soiled room in the hospital, like in Chicago. Again, here we go in Obama's
President's
backyard.
territory,
Yeah.
correct.
Or, like with Kermit Gosnell, have their necks snipped, who are killed in such atrocious and horrible ways. We hope that there's an awakening with a conviction of this man, how horrible these children died. And once again, you have to think about the last minutes, the last throes of death with a baby. It's just so horrible.
We also have to say something, and I didn't plan on bringing this up, but within Obamacare itself, because of the fact the Bart Stupak Pitts Amendment was not included within Obamacare, okay, there is funding, financial money for the killing of babies. How do I know that? First of all, you have to have an amendment that specifically states in writing that we are not going to allow federal funding, we're not going to allow money to be in Obamacare for this specific purpose. That's not in there. Well, you say, well, the president wrote an executive order to keep it out. Well, here's the problem with that. The executive order, no executive order by any president, first of all, has the force of law. Secondly, you say, well, there's the Hyde Amendment. Well, the Hyde Amendment wasn't renewed because that's renewed annually. And the executive order doesn't have the statutory language of the Hyde Amendment in it. And by the way, when Obamacare was passed, Planned Parenthood was celebrating. Not only that, look at the DHHS regulations that have been written into it since the passage of Obamacare, okay, by Kathleen Sebelius, the former governor of Kansas, who was a 100% pro-abortion rating. So you have in Obamacare through DHHS regulations, you have birth control, okay, you have sterilization, and you have abortion through drugs called abortifacient drugs. And so that's another front that we have to be attacking on in this issue.
Wow, there's so many things. And of course, I've been joined by Reverend Robert Solomon of Guilford Baptist Church here in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for being with us, Reverend.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
And remember, you're here inside the Beltway with Star Parker on Urban Family Talk. This has been another Pro-Life Friday, Day Gardner. We're going to see you next time.
That we need to fight on the other side, the liberals who've engaged us in a aggressive war. We are in this aggressive cultural war for the very heart and soul of our country. And the reality is there are just not enough warriors.